All right. Okay, first question this week. This comes from Calix. Calix says, "Hey guys, just wondering if you have any tips for setting up a base training camp. How many hours should I add? What kind of intensity should I do, if any, as well as extra fueling? Would you add saunas? Love the show, by the way. Thanks for the help, Calix."
Saunas? Yes.
I knew you were going to say that.
End of question. No, I'm just kidding.
Do all the things, because a training camp is the opportunity to do stuff that you can't do on a regular basis because of time constraints or whatever it may be. So like all the 1% things, hit your foam rolling and mobility, do well, let's start with volume. And that's like,
yeah, I think you got to cover the basics first.
It depends on what you've been doing. You can't have been doing like 8 hours regularly and then say, yeah, I'll do 20 to 25 hours.
So what would you say is like a guideline for percentage of increase?
%50.
Yeah, my rule of thumb is usually 50%.
So if you do 12, don't add more than 6.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Roughly.
To go from 12 to 18 would be a lot. Like from 12 to 18 is a big jump. And I mean,
I think it depends on, are we talking, is this like a 1 week camp? Is this a 2 week camp? Is this a 3 week camp?
Calix just says base training camp. So let's think about it as a 1 week training camp.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think the number of weeks or, the length of the camp makes a difference.
Totally.
You can obviously go bigger on that week if it's just 1 week than if it's 3 weeks long.
Well, so let's, considering that he's calling it a base training camp. So assuming earlier in the season while you're still in base training, probably not going to be as much focus on intensity. Dylan, you've talked a lot and done quite a few volume blocks. What's your general rule of thumb for a volume block? Because I think you could probably consider this to be similar.
Yeah. I mean, if it's just 1 week volume block, I think the highest that I would go is doubling volume.
Okay.
And I probably wouldn't do that if it's your first time doing a volume block. So if you're very well experienced with volume blocks, I think the high end would be doubling. I think probably a safer bet if it's your first time ever doing this is doing what you guys are suggesting, where you're increasing by 50%.
Yeah. So I think that's good to give a range, and I think based on experience level, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. How much intensity would you consider adding in, if any?
I mean, it really depends on where in the base training you are. Like, is this your first month of base training? Is this your last month of base training? I think as you progress through your base training, you add in more intensity. So one could make the argument that because this is more volume than you're used to, that you should really just stick to zone 2, and that's where you're going to get your stimulus from. And I have no problem with that argument. But I've actually been doing just normal amount of intensity in these volume blocks, and I don't necessarily think that that's a hindrance. You might think that it would be a hindrance because you're so fatigued from this extra volume, but sometimes that, what I call the stage race effect kicks in, and you can actually do intensity just fine. And I think it's probably a good opportunity to do that. So I would say it really depends on where you are in your base training. If you're early into your base training, you might not do any intensity. It might just be a higher volume week than you're used to at mostly zone 2. If you're later into your base training, I would say, 1 or 2 intensity days in the week. And when I say intensity, it's probably not going to be a VO2 max or a 30-30 session. It might just be threshold or tempo.
Sure.
Do you when you're doing a volume block, do you think you should, on the days that you do intensity, should those days stay relatively normal as far as volume goes, or do you add volume on those days as well?
I think it should be a little bit longer than like an hour and a half intensity session.
Yeah, it really depends on what your goal is for the week and what your goal is for racing, and when I mean, if you're training for,
should still be the volume.
Yeah, if you're training for longer races, like I think that having a high volume day be your intensity day as well is a good idea. And if you're trying to do a high volume week, sometimes just out of necessity, you need to add volume on those intensity days, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah, like Caitlin said, the emphasis is on the volume. So, if quality of intensity decreases a little bit, I think that's okay during this time. And being the fact that the emphasis on volume, we're also not trying to do these like breakout intensity days where you're doing, a crazy amount of intensity. It should just be a standard intensity session. Probably similar to what the previous week was.
If you're going to double your volume, I wouldn't do anything over tempo, honestly. I do longer bouts of tempo, and sometimes that's just fun. It just breaks up the monotony of just doing zone 2 all the time. Like, find a good climb and just ride tempo.
Yeah, again, especially if you're talking base season and you're not really doing any super high intensity yet. Yeah, the only thing that I agree with Dylan. If you're very early on in the base season, the fact that you're not really adjusted to the intensity stimulus yet could be a problem for introducing too much intensity during this kind of a week. But the later you get into the base season, like the reason I don't like the idea of just skipping intensity altogether is usually after this big week, you're going to have a week of recovery. So before you know it, you could end up going 2.5 weeks without doing intensity. And to me, like that's a pretty big setback intensity wise. So I like to just think about it as like maintenance intensity.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, fueling, I think, becomes a huge important thing for a base week. If you're going to be bumping your volume up, that's not the time to try to cut back calories or anything like that. If anything, you're probably going to have to increase your calorie count both on the bike and off the bike. Otherwise, you're just going to feel worse and worse each day as your body gets more and more depleted. So that's like a big crucial thing that I think people need to be aware of. Like, yeah, even on the bike, like you might be in the last hour of your ride, but I'd still be hitting the carbs pretty good even in the last hour, so where you're already like getting a bump on the recovery so that the next day you're feeling good still.
You know what you should do? Nap. That's the best.
If you're riding all day, when would you nap?
If you get out in the afternoon. I think you can nap up till like 3 o'clock.
Not on my volume blocks, man. I ride all day. Sun up to sun down. I have stopped before and had to like close my eyes for like 10 minutes.
Are you serious?
While you're
riding? In the middle of a ride. Back when I was doing those 4 a.m. That 4 a.m. job I had for a year, there were a lot of times where I'd be in the middle of a ride and could barely keep my eyes open. And I'd pull over. And
that's so not good, dude.
I know. Luckily, I'm not in that phase of life anymore.
Okay, so to wrap this one up, Caitlin, you said add in all of the things.
Of course. She's right in the middle of
preparing
for like the most bougie camp in existence. Yeah, she's going to do all of it.
Yeah, schedule you a massage. I mean,
yoga, ice bath, sauna, one-on-one coaching sessions. Just sign up for the Crested Butte camp right now, dude. You don't have to create your own base training camp. Go to Caitlin's.
It's true.
He's got a point.
Yeah. So he specifically called out sauna on here. If you haven't been heat training or sauna training, would you actually consider adding this into your training camp?
No. Yeah, why not? You're not going to kill yourself from a 20-minute sauna session.
I don't think you should start in 20 minutes.
I don't know.
I don't think I would. I think sauna, just like everything, is something that you need to build up gradually over time, get adapted to.
Yeah, you're right.
I wouldn't necessarily add sauna the week that you're also adding 50% extra volume.
Yeah, that's kind of what my thought process was. And especially if you're not already saunaing, that means you probably don't have access to a sauna. So whatever benefit you're going to get from a couple days of sauna sessioning during a training camp is just going to
go away,
be fleeting by the time, you know, the next week rolls around. So
true.
If you want, like, yeah.
I mean, if you want to start and the stars align and you schedule a massage and the same place has a sauna and you have the opportunity to just pop in after, like,
sure,
10 to 12 minutes.
Hey, but then you're going to get hooked, and then you're going to have to build one in your basement, and and you're just...
Dude, you built one in your basement before you even got hooked.
I know. I had never once been to the sauna, and I decided to build one in my basement. And I don't regret it. Last night, actually, this was the first time I've done this. I actually put water on the rocks, and I was surprised.
That's the first time you've done that?
Yeah, never done that. Because like everything that I've listened to has said that it doesn't really matter. It just makes it feel hotter. And I'm like, I don't care. And I was surprised at how much hotter it felt when I put water on the
yeah, because you're increasing the humidity. That's the whole point.
I know, significantly changed the experience. I was like, whoa, that was way worse or better, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, depends what you're going for.
So I think I'm gonna start doing that every day. And I don't know if there's like, I was putting a lot of water on there, and it like, it's so fast, like it just disappears as soon as it touches. It's crazy. It's mesmerizing.
Yeah. So going back to it, I think adding in anything that can promote recovery, totally cool. Go for it. As long as it's not taken away from sleep.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
think just adding anything like foreign training stimulus. So like if you're going to the sauna because you're getting a massage and it's a spa day and you're just gonna go there to relax, like that's not training, right? Like you're not intentionally heat training. But if he's like, I'm assuming he's talking about heat training here, and I just wouldn't add any kind of extra training stimulus like that.
But sauna's kind of a tricky one because there are certain aspects of it that you would consider would be for adaptation as far as training and heat. But then other parts of the sauna, or like other benefits of the sauna, do help with recovery, like sleep. Like it's proven that if you hit the sauna, it helps you sleep better at night, which obviously would be an improvement in recovery. So I don't know if the stimulus outweighs the.
But again, for that, you're not going for 20 minutes because you can get that recovery benefit from 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah. So then you don't risk like overdoing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think a lot of people underestimate how much effect all this added training load is going to have on you. And like you might get 3 days in and you're feeling great, but then you get 5 days in and you start not feeling great. And then you're supposed to be there for 7 days. And before you know it, it's like you can't ride on the last day, or you get to the next week and like you can hardly move, you know, which is fine because it's a recovery week. But you don't like when you look at the mesocycle, you know, I guess it'd be the mesocycle. Like if you're looking at, you know, the month training block, your month should still be bigger than a normal month. So if this increased week causes your volume in training to decrease for the next 2 weeks and then it just equals out, like you're probably not getting as much out of that training camp as like you should be.
Good point. And I don't think there's anything wrong with planning a rest or recovery day in the middle of that camp. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. As long as it's long enough, you know, I don't think you need a recovery day if it's a 5-day camp.
Yeah.
But anything beyond a 5-day camp, I think having one down day, like active recovery day,
right? Like
it could still be enjoyable. You could still get out and, you know, do a hike or, you know, walk around wherever you're at or something. But it should be recovery focused.
Yeah. Yeah. If that one recovery day allows you to do more volume total for the whole week because you're going to be rested for the next few days after that, then totally worth it.
All right, let's get on to John's question here. This is John from Merca. John's interested in doing the MidSouth double. Let's go.
Nice. I should have read this one last week. Tyler was on.
Yeah, true. Hello, Caitlin and Caitlin's friends. Big fan of the pod.
Caitlin almost choked. That's awesome.
How would you add running to your training when preparing for a trail running event? Imagine next year's MidSouth double, which both Tyler and Drew, yeah, I know, we should have read this last week, have
Correction.
run. Assume
And
the event
I
actually
won
happens
it,
this
so just saying, correction.
time. There's plenty of time to prepare ahead, but the weekly volume is still my usual 8 to 10 hours per week. Cycling would be the priority. The goal is to just not die during the run. I'm curious how you would go about structuring a whole season of training, especially how to make time for long runs. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. And then he says, Drew, don't be a hater and say there's not enough time to train for this. And then he says, PPS. Okay, I'll go first. I recommend adding regular easy runs, maybe replacing a shorter endurance day. Try to make time for some double days. Keep doing your usual periodized cycling training blocks, and now add some running focused training blocks. Eat more. Man, John, you're just answering your own questions here.
Next question.
Pretty close.
The big thing that when I was doing it, that I was trying to do was I was doing 2 hard runs during the week. I was still training on the bike, so I was getting most of my volume on the bike, and I would do 2 hard runs, meaning like I was doing intervals running. And I think at that time I wasn't doing any intensity on the bike because it was base season for me. And my priorities for racing were still crit and road racing. So the double was more of just like a base season thing that I was doing.
Okay.
So I was doing intensity running, standard like high volume or just endurance volume on the bike. And then on the weekends, what I was really trying to do was to try to replicate the double. Was I would do a long run Saturday, that would be the only thing I did was a long run. Like we're talking, like I was trying to push to get up to the point of the as long as the race, and the race for me was like roughly 4 hours, and so I think I got up to a little over 3 hours or around 3 hours of running on those long runs, but a lot of times it was like 2.5 hours. But then Sunday I would follow that up with a really long, maybe even I think maybe I was sprinkling in some tempo in there as well on the bike, because that would replicate the double pattern or whatever you say, where you run on day 1 and bike on day 2. So I was trying to make sure my body could that I was training my body to get used to that back-to-back effort of long run, long ride.
So when you said that early on, I think you only said that you only had 10 or 12 weeks to prepare for this, right? When you decided to do it.
Yeah, I think it was 12 weeks. Yeah.
So you were doing 2 days of intensity runs per week, you said?
No, just 2 days. So like a Tuesday, Thursday.
That's what I just said.
You said 2 days.
Oh, I meant to say 2 days.
Yeah. 2 days
of intensity running.
Like I was doing like track workouts and trail run workouts.
So how much running had you been doing prior to that? Because you were just coming off of a cyclocross season, so you're probably doing some running during cyclocross season.
Yeah, very minimal during the cross season. And then I took like 2 weeks off the bike completely. And during the 2 weeks off the bike, I started to run a little bit more and more. But when I was doing those hard days, I was only running an hour, and I was riding on those days too, but I wouldn't do I think if I remember correctly, all my intensity for a while there was coming just from the runs. And so I would do a really hard track workout or something like that, like short intervals of running, and then later that day maybe ride endurance on the bike or something like that to get more stimulus. And I remember I did with running, I basically did reverse periodization. So I started with really hard, really short intervals, and as I got closer to the event, those intervals got longer and less hard. So kind of reverse periodization.
Yeah, I think it makes sense
for the run. Kind of the opposite on the bike.
Sure.
So it's like I was reverse periodization on my running, and then at the same time was doing standard periodization with my cycling.
That seems.
I would say.
Okay.
I would say if you're not used to running, doing a lot of high intensity running, just the leg turnover and the pounding, and especially if like you're primarily doing this stuff on asphalt, it's probably not a good idea. So I would go with the mentality of just trying to get time on feet. And if you can get to a trail and like, you say you're going to go out for an hour, don't run the hour, but just hike, run, just to get time on feet and get your body acclimated to that kind of stress and stimulus.
You could also do hills too. Hills kind of eliminate the a little bit of the impact and stuff. Like I did a lot of
if you're running down.
Yeah, don't.
Adam knows all about that.
Oh, well, I mean, like doing the intervals up and
hill
then,
sprints. Yeah,
hill sprints, and I was doing them on trail, so that helps too.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing that I like, I don't think I would go the whole whatever we are, 9 months, 10 months from now until Mid-South double without doing any run intensity. Because you are going to be racing this thing and you are going to be running downhill, and I think actually at some point you should introduce downhill. They don't have to be sprints or intervals per se, but like fast running downhill, because over the course of 30 miles of running up and down hills, the downhills will start to wreak havoc if you're not used to that, to like those muscle groups being stimulated.
I would also tell them, this was like, if I could go back and tell myself this, there are a few really good, and you can do these with bands in the gym to strengthen your IT bands and your hip flexors and stuff. Like if you're going to increase your running volume, it's almost like a given that those things are going to flare up at some point. So if you can do something now to strengthen those things so that doesn't happen further down the road, then that's what I would encourage you to do, is like make that a priority. A lot of people neglect it and then it becomes a problem and then it's too late to strengthen it. So then you just have to recover and you're thinking, darn, I wish I had like done something to like strengthen this, mostly like your IT bands and your hip flexors.
Sure.
Once you've built up your mileage though, and like say you are going to do a volume block before the double, if you've gotten to a point where your body can handle it, you just feel better all around if you're able to do, like for your volume block, a big ride and then a big run and then a big ride and then a rest and then a big run and then a big ride. You just feel like balanced just as a human being, just using different muscle groups. It's the best. So
yeah, well, I mean, and it'd be good training too for the double format.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best compliments I've gotten was like somebody was riding behind me and told me that I don't even know what it is, but some little part of my hip, like the muscle that basically goes over the ball of your hip, basically to the sides of your butt or whatever, like mine was popping out, and an old coach of mine was like, dang, your hips are ripped. And I was like, all right. And it was because I was running so much during that time that I had like muscle in places that other cyclists didn't have muscle, which was kind of, I don't know, to Caitlin's point, it made me feel pretty good.
Anything else we'd add here for John?
Anything for you, Dylan? You run a little, don't you, buddy?
Only in the off season. I feel like I don't run enough to give personal experience on this.
When we did our physiological testing, I think the only area of all the things that we tested that I had any kind of an edge on Dylan was bone density. And I was like, yes, it's because I run. I was so proud. I was like, all right, I got you on one thing.
Is that good though? That means your bones are heavier.
But it means I'm more, I was going to say durable, but that would be, with the way that word's been used lately, people are going to misunderstand that.
Yeah, you're less likely to get injured, I guess.
There you go. That's what the original definition, I think, of durable means.
Yeah. I mean, both our bone densities were healthy. So
yeah. You don't have osteoporosis or anything like that.
Yeah, right. Osteoporosis.
What did I say?
Osteoporosis.
Oh, my bad. I just mispronounced it.
Drew, anything else you want to add for John from the former champ?
Practice your fueling, because you can't just transfer over your bike fueling to run, because your entire GI is getting bounced up and down when you're running, and so it's a little bit harder to get in as high of a carb intake. So one of the things that I also did was I looked up exactly where the fueling stations and stuff would be at the MidSouth, and then replicated that in running. So at the MidSouth, they have an aid station every 5 miles and with neutral support. And then at the halfway point at 16 miles, you can have somebody there. So I did all my training based around that. So I did every 5 miles, I was taking in, back then, I was taking those honey stinger gels. I would take one of those when I could see the tent. And then when I got to the tent, I'd grab water and chug it and keep going. And then I was also running with a little Nathan. So the only reason I remember that it was called a Nathan is because CJ was like, "Oh, are you and your buddy Nathan going for a run?" And she'd make fun of me because I would go run with this little water bottle strapped to my hand. But I would have a hyper concentrated carb mix in there as well. I don't remember. I wasn't getting nearly as many carbs as I do on the bike, just because it's harder to get them in when you're running. And that seemed pretty good until like the last 2 miles, basically.
Yeah, I was actually, with my training leading up to last weekend, I was pretty surprised by how much intake I was able to consume. So during the race, I did almost 100 grams an hour.
Yeah, I think that's more than what I did.
And I did a little over 5.5 liters over 7 hours.
Of what? Of liquid?
Of fluids, yeah.
That's way more than I did.
Yeah,
I didn't race with a pack, so the only fluids I took in were from the little cups of water they gave me and my Nathan.
So my format was 100 hill repeats, and I did every 5 repeats. I would grab my pack, and then use the pack for 5 repeats, and then drop it. So that way, I only had to carry the pack for half of them.
Yeah.
And then I was just consuming everything during those 5 laps. But yeah, I mean, I didn't start there, but I will say I felt like my on the bike nutrition translated over pretty well. Like I was able to start at 65, 70 grams an hour pretty quickly. But the thing that a lot of people run into with running, and I think why it's not as common to see people taking in as much, is because most people go out for a 5-mile run and bring nothing. They don't bring gels, they don't bring water, they don't bring anything. So you're just never training your gut.
Yeah.
So I think to get to that point, you have to just I would bring my pack, even if I was only going for a 5 or 6 mile run. I knew I didn't necessarily need it, quote unquote, but it was an opportunity for me to do the gut training. So I took advantage of it. But I was only consuming gels. I didn't do high carb drink mix, or I didn't do any food. It was just gels
and water from the pack.
The pack had electrolytes. So each pack had 1.5 or no 2. Each pack had 2 liters and 2,500 mgs of sodium. So pretty high sodium content. Yeah, and that worked for me. So I was pretty surprised though, and I will say, right now in the world of elite endurance sports, running might be up there as the sport that's pushing the limits on carb intake per hour, which is crazy. You wouldn't think that that's the case, but there are a lot of elite ultra runners that are pushing close to 200 grams an hour.
Running and triathlon.
Triathletes
go crazy.
Yeah, which cycling, I think, was the first to really adopt the high carb intake. But then it seems like it's kind of stagnated around the 100 to 150 grams an hour. But it's these other sports are really pushing the limits.
I thought running was behind on all that, but I guess
I think they were, but it's very recent, in the last few years, that it's really coming around.
It's interesting.
Cool. Well, hey, let's save Gion's question for next week. We're going to get into VO2 max potential. We'll let you rest on that for another week.
You're gonna let me stew on this for a week?
Yep.
Dang, so jealous of this kid. I don't even know how old. I don't know how old he is. Oh, he's 20.
20. Yeah. All right. So Gian, we'll get you next week.
Did you read it, Dylan? Do you know what his VO2 is?
Yeah. No. We'll save it.
What?
Don't spoil it.
I wanted to stew on Dylan as well for the next week.
You can stew on Dylan once I hit stop here.
What is it, 95 or something?
95.